Hi, we're Nia and Marianne from Seren Health Coaching. We are metabolic health coaches who are passionate about good metabolic health for everyone. We also love to chat about all things health and to share as much information as we can with people who want to make changes to their lifestyle but aren't quite sure where to start. We're going to release a new episode every Friday where we talk about a different aspect of health. So do subscribe and let us know what you think. We'd also love to know what you're interested in too. So if there's something that you'd like us to have a chat about, do send us a message and we'll do our best to cover it soon.
Yeah, we're going to talk about something really fun now. We talked about the benefits of walking last week.
Yes.
And it did make me think about my Fitbit that I gave away recently, but all about it made me think about pedometers and step counts and
Yeah.
that whole malarkey some years ago
Ooh,
now. And
yes.
is it, whether it's actually worth counting your steps? So this is
Oh,
this
yes.
is a little follow on.
I
Right.
think this is really, really important because you say you gave away your Fitbit. Well, I remember very vividly when my husband thought it was a good idea to have a Fitbit,
Yeah, we all
and
did.
and
Yeah.
then I thought I'll have one, but then I realised that his Fitbit on his arm was only recording when he moved his arm, and when I was pushing the pushchair, because this is when my children were babies,
Oh, it didn't
it
move.
didn't record. So
Oh,
I had
yes.
to buy a little
Yes.
clip-on one that went onto, like, my waistband or
That's
whatever,
very funny.
isn't it? So, okay, let's go back to the concept then. Where did
Yeah.
it come from and why? Well, is it an actual tool that is of any use, really?
Well, it is a really interesting history around step counting. So nobody really talked about step counting until 1964, right?
Ooh,
And what happened in 1964?
no idea. I
You
wasn't
won't you
alive.
won't remember because you weren't even born, but
Sorry.
it was the Tokyo Olympic Games, okay?
Ooh,
And the symbol in Japanese, I'm really fascinated by this, but the symbol in Japanese for 10,000
yeah.
is a man walking or a person walking, okay?
Okay, so what was this
That's what it
because
looks like.
they were doing the 10,000 meters? Is
No,
that
I
how
don't
people saw
think
it?
so. I think it was more to do with how you write 10,000 in Japanese, that it looks like
Yeah.
somebody's.
No, it was only that I was thinking, if they put in in the Olympic Games, don't
Yeah,
they
oh,
do the
yes, they
10,000
yeah.
meters? Yeah?
Yeah, that might well have been the hookup, and there was also like a sort of a target board, but it was a marketing campaign basically, and it was brilliant because it gave people this concept, particularly in Japan. It was done pre the games, that to get fitter, they
Mm.
wanted people to walk more. Because
Okay.
often when you have a games, we saw it here, didn't we, in London? When
Mm.
there's a games in your country, there's a huge spotlight on exercise and um, getting fit,
Yeah.
and so anyway, this was part of this marketing campaign, and the 10,000 steps sort of rolled off the tongue, and it remained 10,000 steps being the target for
Mm.
using walking to get fit, and thus came eventually the whole Fitbit thing, and we all walked around with Fitbits on our wrists, but as you say, it
Only
didn't
works
measure
if you
certain things.
actually move
And
your arm.
I always think I row every morning. It doesn't measure rowing. It doesn't
Yeah.
measure my exercise class, whatever it is. So I long got bored with Fitbits, and I'm sure a lot of us did. So what
Yeah.
happened about Fitbits was we got obsessed with the step count and not with the exercise.
Yes.
Um,
So that's where I think we
yeah,
often had that conversation about the
yeah,
very
yeah,
obsessive behavior that you got with people at the end of the day
exactly.
when they
Yeah,
realised they hadn't hit their step
yeah.
count and were doing laps of the garden or whatever.
Exactly. And I have been myself out for a walk late at night to get my step count up because there was basically you were challenging yourself with your Fitbit.
Yeah.
None
Yeah.
of this is a bad thing, but when you find yourself at 12 o'clock at night running around trying to get your step count in before you go to bed, you think this is a little bit odd, little bit odd.
Yes.
And but it's still not as odd as you might think. And Was 10,000 steps ever evidence-based and a magic
Well,
number? That's the
yeah,
question.
this is the question, isn't it? Because,
Yeah,
some days you feel like you've moved a lot and you feel physically tired, but when you look at your step count, maybe it's only
it's not that
6,000.
much. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. But you cleaned the kitchen floor.
Well, or
Um,
you've have actually walked a fair pace, or, a fair distance or at a fair pace, but your pedometer is saying, well, actually, you didn't do enough.
so
Um,
this brilliant campaign that used
Came
10,000
out of
steps
nowhere.
was based on nothing. Well,
On
it was
nothing.
based on nothing evidence-based and nothing scientific. It was purely the way 10,000 looked on in Japanese
And isn't
writing.
this always the way, right?
Yeah,
So many
often,
things, they
often,
are
yeah.
often not backed up, and then all of a sudden they become, and I can tell you, if I asked a random sample of people on the street, most people would say, "Yeah, I should do 10,000 steps a
Yeah,
day,"
really
with
interesting.
absolutely no
No
idea that there's no actual
evidence.
evidence.
Well,
Amazing.
there is evidence, and this is what's also even more interesting about science, I think, is you start with this hypothesis that people should be walking 10,000 steps if they want to get fit, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And then what happens to science is it'll test the hypothesis. I mean, that's
yeah.
what science does. So there's numerous studies saying if people, two groups of people, one group are doing 10,000 steps, the other are not doing counted steps, that the people in the 10,000 steps group will have
Mhm.
lower blood pressures, less risk of heart disease, whatever you want, because of course
Of
that's
course
going to
there's
work.
benefits to it.
Yeah, of course it's going to work. But then it becomes evidence for 10,000 steps.
Yeah, yeah.
Isn't that how it works? So
But
I
we have
find it
never
really
compared.
fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, we've never compared people who do 6,000 steps to 10,000 steps to see if it's any better. Um,
So I started looking at the evidence, and this is exactly what I found. Of course, there are benefits. There's a study that claims 10,000 steps decreases your risk of dementia by 50%. I
yeah.
mean, that's pretty cool.
Isn't that fab? Yeah.
But it doesn't specify how much a lower step count would decrease the risk. So,
Yeah.
so there'd be some sort of relative
Yeah, so if you only
step.
did 5,000, would it
Yeah.
only reduce
Would
your risk by
you get
25%?
25%?
Or
Yeah.
was it yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you do your steps outside, there's a study that correlates this to lowering anxiety and depression,
Which is what we talked about
which,
last time
yeah,
about, being
yeah,
out in
that sort of
nature
makes
and
sense.
yeah.
There's definitely a reduction in knee and hip joint pain at 10,000 steps,
Yeah.
but not sure how this applies if the step count decreases. There's
Okay.
a research paper in JAMA explored the possibility of a lower risk of premature death for every 2,000 steps you go up a day.
So we should all walk to infinity every day then because no one wants to die
Yes,
early.
oh, you're such a scientist. No, I think it stops at 10.
Oh,
There's
okay.
another
Yeah.
study in JAMA Neurology found a possible link between 10,000 and reduced risk of CVD strokes, 13 types of cancer and heart failure.
So
So
basically,
all these studies
walking is good for
basically,
you.
yeah, basically all these studies, there's studies about improved mental clarity and creativity and step counts, which we talked a bit about in
Yeah.
walking. So basically it isn't bad for you and maybe exceptionally good. That's what I found in the
So,
evidence. And I thought,
as I said last
yeah.
week, walking is wonderful. It is a gateway drug,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
it's got no side
Okay.
effects really. That's it.
So I thought about you
Unless you
as a
fall over.
pharmacist,
Yeah.
and it could be as good for you as medications without the risk of the side effects or the costs. I mean,
Yeah.
what is not to like about this?
It's not to
Okay,
love.
so let's go back to actual step counts. So when you read the evidence, you get bowled over by it, and so you should, right?
Yeah.
All that time ago, I bought that Fitbit, but then I got bored with it. But a few interesting things when I think back, what happened
Mm.
was that I stopped riding my bike. I lived in quite a small market town, and the
Yeah.
step counter didn't do the bike.
So you got off the
So
bike and you walked
yeah, so I had to
instead.
get off the bike and walk to work. Now, it was a brisk 10-minute walk to work, right?
Yeah.
And I'd always use my bike around town because it's much quicker, a bit like
Yeah.
people use their car.
Yeah.
So I thought biking was healthy for me, which it is. but at the rate I was biking. So step in for 10 minutes briskly, you'll get more health benefits than riding your bike for 3 minutes fast, right?
Okay.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense? So
Mhm.
so it got me off the bike, which was very useful for my bones. It was very useful for all sorts of things. It was also good stress reliever, by the way, walking home. I
Mm.
walked home for lunch quite often. So basically I got 40 minutes more brisk walking in my day than I had before. I mean,
Yeah.
what's not to like about this?
Yes.
So Fitbits really were very useful. But then, I basically stopped counting because the novelty wears off.
Mm.
Um, but even things like climbing stairs and not using the escalator, it would have given you that incentive to think, oh, my, if I climb this flight of stairs, I'm adding to my step count, right?
Yeah.
So much is in your mindset. It really does change everything, that mindset. Um, so
Okay.
what happened?
So
Why did we
yeah,
why did we go cold on step counting?
why well, this is the thing now because Fitbit was obviously the inaugural thing, wasn't
Yeah.
it? I mean, there were pedometers, right? There were pedometers. They weren't
Yeah.
quite
You
they
tied
weren't
them to your waist,
you
do
had
you
to put them on your
remember?
waist. They weren't
Yeah.
particularly attractive. A
No.
Fitbit was
I had one
was
of
kind
them.
of quite sleek and attractive,
Well,
like
the
the
watch
iPhone.
thing, it was
Yeah,
like,
and
yeah,
it had a
like an Apple
watch.
product.
It
Yeah.
had a watch, and it gave you a little buzz when you'd done.
Kudos.
Yeah, it gave you a buzz,
Kudos.
didn't it, when you reached
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
step target?
And you're also
Um,
showing everyone else that you are really healthy.
yeah. Well, you see, this is the thing. There is something currently. It's almost like a wristband that looks a little bit like
Okay.
a watch. I have to look
Yeah.
it up. There's people that wear the rings that close the rings
Yeah.
on the Apple Watch,
The
and all of
Onyx.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's a bit of a gimmick, and I can see how it can be really
Yeah. I
effective.
think gimmicks are fine, as long as, like I say, my Fitbit made me give up my bicycle around town. And I think, I didn't know it then, but that was a long-term habit that was going to stick.
Mm,
Um, so I'm not against gimmicks actually if they get you off the ground, so to
yeah.
speak. But you will eventually get bored with them. But what happened recently to me? So I got very excited, then I went off the whole thing, and then I wouldn't have known my step count at all. Um,
Yes.
okay, and then what happened recently was one of my daughters started telling me how incredibly sedentary she was.
Mm.
She works from home and she works on a computer all day. She's very stressed, and she started looking on her phone at her step count. I didn't even know that I had my step count on my phone, of course,
Yes. Yeah.
but there it was. So almost everybody is counting their steps if they know where to look. So you just have to download the health
That,
app or
or
whatever
just
it is.
activate the app. Yeah.
And what she said was, it made her very aware of just how little she was walking. So or moving. So it doesn't matter then what quality of fuel you're putting into your body. If you're actually not moving at all, that's a really hard gig for your body to
Mm.
make any sense. So I started to look on my phone, and some days I was so embarrassed. I thought I'll have to take this dog for another walk because my step count can be. I also work online quite a lot. I'm on a computer quite a lot.
Mm.
We live rurally, so I can't do my shopping. I don't have kids to drop at school and all of that. So I think it's been wonderful, actually. And I'm not saying I always look at it, and on bad days, I distinctly don't. But I see the graph, and some days I walk a lot. It
Mm.
also measures moving around. So if I'm pottering in my house, hanging up washing, cleaning the floors, whatever, it just shows you that everyday movement is very, very
Worthwhile.
beneficial. And what it's done for that daughter and a few others, by the way, who all live in the same place, is that they all walk into work. And for instance, the daughter who works from home has started working from her office because it's an option and it's a 45-minute walk. She used to ride a bike. Both the other daughters now walk rather than ride bikes. Not always, and sometimes they're in a hurry. But what I mean is it's that awareness.
Yeah.
I'm so amazed how easy it is if you create awareness for you to just make a slightly different choice.
Yeah,
Um, so
absolutely.
I'm
So
keen. I'm keen
so
on
keen on
these.
your step
Yeah,
counts
I've
now.
gone back on.
Yeah. So I wonder, is it one of those things? I often think that trackers are like for a season. So you can track yourself for maybe a
Mm,
month and see your
mm.
general
Yeah,
trends, see what
yeah, and
you
then you've
do.
got it.
Then you've
Yeah,
got it, then. You don't need to
yeah.
do it any longer. And I think, my phone used to tell me my steps. And then I just thought, well, I'm walking the same route every
Yeah,
day.
you
I know
sort of
how
know.
far I've
Yeah, it's a
gone.
bit like weighing yourself every morning, isn't it?
Yeah.
So if you've got very stable, if you're lucky enough to have very stable weight, it
You don't
starts to
need
get
to.
really boring to get on your scales. And I
Yeah.
think pedometers are much the same. But if I look back over a week, I've got a nifty little graph, and it
Yeah.
just shows you that some days you're still really sedentary.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and I
as we said,
like
there are
that.
some
I
real
like that.
serious health consequences to just being
Yeah,
sedentary all the time.
yeah,
So it's
yeah,
bringing awareness to it. It's making
yeah,
you think about things a bit more. But it's
yeah.
really important to point out that you mustn't become obsessive with it,
No,
because I think
and
that's
you
the
you don't
problem.
want to be one of these people who walks around the garden at 12 o'clock at night. You really don't.
No, I mean
Um,
that's we would really encourage you not to beat your. It's not a beration tool to beat yourself over
no,
the head with. Oh, I
no.
didn't make my
Same as
10,000
counting
steps.
calories, isn't it? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
it's
all
very
of that kind of
similar.
thing. All of this
Yeah.
stuff is data is really helpful and very
No,
data driven in a way, but data should never be used as a means of beating yourself up for what you haven't done.
I'm a serious advocate for at least checking it out on your phone and just to show yourself
What is
how
possible?
sedentary you. I wouldn't worry about the step count, by the way, the number. So some people will find it really easy to do 10,000 steps. Some people will find it almost impossible, and there's everything in
Yeah.
between. So
Mm.
if you're doing 2,000 or less, just increasing your step
Yeah,
count
just maybe
even
to 3.
by 2,000 will be a huge benefit. So don't worry about the number.
Yeah.
And by the way, another little thing for listeners, if you type 23 and a half hours into your browser,
Oh,
years
yes, yeah.
ago, I found this wonderful little um, uh, animated health, uh,
Video.
what would you call it? Yeah,
It's
video.
like it's an animated infographic, I would call it.
Okay, there you go. There's the millennial. She's got a term for it.
That's probably
And it was
wrong.
a study. It was about a study done in Japan for workers in a factory. But I think if you type that in, it's not very long, but it's absolutely shows you the
Mm.
benefits of stepping, of walking, and why you would absolutely want to be somebody who lives further from the factory actually rather
Yeah.
than buys a house closer. And I mean,
Yeah.
it's just a lovely little illustration. So have a go.
Yeah, and
Um,
I think, if you use the walking to work as a stress reliever, that can be
yeah, all of
that can make
that.
massive
The
implications in
mental,
your
the
mental health
mental
too.
transition between home and work, and again between work and home, all
Mm.
that stuff is really useful.
And
Um,
you don't have to sit in your car and get cross with other people who can't drive.
exactly. Yeah, which is incredibly stressful. I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah, yeah.
So have a little peek. I used to play it for patients in my room because I thought it was more powerful than anything I could say. And especially
Mm.
saying things like, well, I hope you're doing 150 minutes of exercise a week. I mean, what does that mean?
I
People
once
even,
tried to, yeah, oh, that was just mad, wasn't it?
yeah, people
I mean,
even say things like, how active are you on quizzes? Are you active, inactive, partly? I mean, it's completely meaningless to me.
it is. It's really difficult. And I mean, unless you are an Olympic athlete who we know are very active, then it is
Yeah,
incredibly difficult to quantify
yeah,
yourself in that way. But the most
yeah,
important thing is your body's built to move. We need to move more often, and there are huge benefits to doing it.
yeah,
And
yeah.
walking is one of the most incredible things that you could possibly do for your health. So even if
Yeah.
it's a short walk, it's going to give you
Yeah,
some
and don't
benefit.
worry where you start, don't I did have a patient once who told me that their biggest step count that week was 286 steps in a
Oh
day
wow, wow,
because they were high flying executive. They parked their car right near the building in the car parking bays that were for the executives, right?
Oh, of
They
course,
didn't have
they're
to
always,
park
yeah,
too far. Yeah.
yeah.
And they went up in the lift. They had back-to-back meetings. And he said the most exercise he did was to go to the loo down the passage. Um, and that he tumbled out after 16 hours or whatever on his computer into his car and lay down on his couch till he went to sleep. I mean, that is a really frightening lifestyle to try and be
To me, that just
healthy.
proves that you shouldn't be a high-flying executive.
No. But it was an awareness
Spoken
for
like a
him
true
that doing what he
non-high-flying
was
executive.
doing was going to kill him almost. I
Yeah.
mean, it was
Yeah, yeah.
going to
Well, yeah,
shorten his
because
life.
ultimately, think about it. There are benefits to being higher up, so you get your car parking space closer to the
Yeah.
building, right? But
And
the
a nice
stress
car.
and a nice car, but the
Yeah.
stress of the job
Stress levels, they go
are
up.
huge.
Yeah.
Is huge.
Yeah.
And the fact that you don't get to move, and
Yeah.
you know, you're probably eating on the run as well, which isn't great for you.
You've got to
Um,
make huge efforts then to insert healthy ways
Lifestyles,
to
yeah.
live
Yeah,
in a
absolutely.
way that maybe a manual worker who walks to work,
Wouldn't
has
have had,
already
yeah.
got a huge advantage. Okay, so people are, there's a whole host of
Other
factors in
factors,
there.
yeah.
So let's not even go there, but there's lots about socioeconomics that are not good either way. Anyway, that's a whole nother can of worms. But look on your phone, check your step count. I promise you it's quite fun, and you'll be embarrassed some days at how little you step.
Yeah.
But at least that awareness starts you thinking, maybe I need to do something.
Yeah, indeed. Cool.
Okay.
All right, then I'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.